Hi, and welcome to another in our series of Unpacking Telematics. And this is brought to you in partnership with Netstar, a subsidiary of the Altan Group and Fleetwatch magazine. My name is Patrick O'Leary. I'm managing editor of Fleetwatch. And in this episode, we're going to be talking a very important subject: how telematics can help schedule fleet service and preventative maintenance. And in the studio with me, I have Ralph Govender, who's Senior Manager, Sales and Business Development at Netstar. Been with the company for well over 23 years. Ralph, a very important subject: preventative maintenance, fleet service. In today's high-cost, pressurized transport environment, a lot of fleets are postponing maintenance.
Yeah.
They are saying, Ralph, do one more trip. And that one more trip becomes another trip, and another trip, and another trip, till the vehicles are running unroadworthy, maintenance or scheduled maintenance are out the window, and everything. Have you noticed, before we get onto our telematics, read this, have you noticed a trend in this in your...
So I have heard stories, of this happening in the industry, and certainly the evidence of this kind of thing is in the media, where you see some really terrible accidents that happen on our national roads, where these big accidents are linked to possible maintenance or lack of maintenance, I should say, on these trucks or even their trailers or non-motorized assets. So it is something that is real, that happens. Unfortunately, what we find is that the rising costs of fuel, of keeping a fleet running, of staff, of labor, etc., are not often matched by rate increases. In fact, very seldom. And so this forces a kind of behavior that says, well, let me get a little bit more out of this asset, so I can justify some of the costs in my business. And ultimately, that ends up costing you in the longer run. Finding ways in which you can pick up bad driver behavior, bad habits in advance, and then doing maintenance on that in advance will actually save you in the longer run. And the pressures of keeping businesses alive and keeping them running sometimes clouds the judgment, and you make a snap decision, and like you said, one more trip, and it can end up being the last trip of that vehicle, or even innocent road users. So it is a concern, yes.
Yeah, we've seen that, and it's a huge concern.
Yeah.
I wanted to start off with that because coming into that is under the title we've got scheduled fleet service and preventative maintenance.
Yes.
Now, that wouldn't have been looked at in the old fleet recovery and, the hijacking arena where you guys all cut your teeth.
Yeah.
But it's now part of fleet management and part of the great telematics offerings.
Yes.
Scheduled fleet services. The OEMs normally have this on the new trucks. Why repeat it? Or are you offering something different?
So again, OEMs may have advanced systems on their trucks that can provide them with, let's say, a warning of a potential failure on a vehicle. But this is limited to typically your more newer trucks or fleets.
Yes.
And by far, the fleets that are out on SA's roads are certainly not all in this bracket. In fact, the majority is probably out of this bracket, where they don't necessarily have the ability to send these automated signals to OEMs. OEM systems are also very expensive, so a lot of operators rely on telematics for this data. And telematics to provide them with an early warning or an imminent danger of parts or something failing on the vehicle. Now, telematics can do that. They can link to, or Netstar system can link to the CAN bus of your truck to provide very rich data and insights through our bureau service that can then say to you, look, we're getting excessive heat signals, for example, or engine warnings, or there's a lot of excessive braking. We need to check your braking system, etc. And armed with that information, as a company, you can then make some informed decisions and say, well, look, truck X, Y, Z, there's imminent danger. Let's get them off. Let's look at the braking system. Let's do some preventative maintenance. And you can do that with data. So if you have the data that supports it, you can then, as a business, take these calls to do that. And then if you're a company that proactively speaks to your customers, that speaks to your suppliers and keeps them in the loop with what's happening, they will understand that there's an element of safety that needs to be adhered to here. You can't buck the system. You can't mess with safety and security on the road. You're traveling on public roads, and it affects everybody, all road users. So it's very important that you keep your fleet in optimal shape, and telematics data can help you to do that.
You know, that is, I would encourage every operator to look at this as an answer, because we do an exercise called Break and Tire Watch, and over the period of the past 8-9 years, we've taken off 760 trucks. We failed 70%. And most of those faults could be prevented by preventive maintenance. So telematics is not only monitoring your fleet, but it's also showing you how to keep your fleet roadworthy.
Correct.
And we know we have a big road safety problem in South Africa. So telematics is playing a big part in this, in preventive maintenance. Is that right, Ralph?
That's 100% correct. I mean, we have certain fleets that we monitor that have very, very old trucks on the road currently. I mean, I'm talking 25, 30-year-old trucks. And they're not as advanced as anywhere close to the newer trucks. But the only reason these trucks are actually on the road running is because of a regimented maintenance routine schedule that will keep an asset going for much longer than intended. And telematics data then enables a lot of operators to then proactively do this. So this is why operators, even with older assets, come to us. And what we find is we're having to find very innovative solutions for the industry, especially when it comes to non-motorized assets. You know, you can't just maintain the truck. You got to maintain what it's pulling, and the trailer holds a massive load. There's certain parameters from a safety point of view. You cannot or you cannot take excessive loading on your vehicles, because that impacts the ability to brake, or even if you're going down a hill. You know, you can't anticipate that if you've got an excessive load, your stopping distance behind pedestrians or even other road users. So it's very important that these assets are also maintained, and Telematics is now able to allow you to manage these devices in different ways. You know, not where you used to do it hourly, you now do it based on mileage and trip data. So you can really, really get to the crux of it and manage these non-motorized assets in a much more efficient way, so that your entire fleet is riding safe on the road, not just the truck, but what it's pulling as well, the cargo and the trailer.
Ralph, you mentioned the trailers before.
Yes.
You're obviously excited about this.
Very.
Is this a new development?
Yeah. So Netstar's done quite a bit of research into this, and we've now brought out, or not now, I would say in the last year, so brought out a very specific device for trailers. Because there's a massive need, and we're finding that large corporate clients that have, let's say, 1,000+ trailers in their fleets are looking for a different way to manage it. You know, they've also realized that doing hourly based maintenance, number one, is either messing with safety and security, or number two, is costing them more. They may be over-servicing trailers, or they may be under-servicing it. And there's now very advanced trailers. You get things like PBS trailers, which are performance-based trailers that run on the road, and they're trains on the road, essentially. And it is vital that these trailers are maintained optimally. They're doing a lot of mileage. But in saying that, if there's an incident with one of them, the potential disaster is massive. So ensuring that these trailers are running optimally, they're getting serviced optimally, it requires a different way of looking at them. You can't simply assign a time period to it and say, well, let's do major servicing every 6 months. You might be utilizing the asset far more and need to do it every 4 months. And that will then help prevent major disasters down the line.
I'm so pleased to hear this, Rob, because I mentioned the 70% of vehicles that we test, we fail.
Yeah.
Most of the faults are on the trailers. Most of them are on the trailers.
Yeah.
But in a way, there hasn't been much for the manufacturer, for the operators to help them manage that. So you've come forward with this.
Absolutely. That we know that there's a need for this. We're seeing an increasing request from companies saying, can you help us manage our non-motorized assets? Assets that may park for weeks on end, assets that are just underutilized maybe. Maybe I have too many of them and I don't need to buy more. It's a costly affair. And if you can optimize the use of these assets, it has an immediate effect on your bottom line. You can then look at your rates. You can look at what you're charging your customers, and you can do it realistically now from a holistic point of view.
Fantastic, Rob.
Yeah.
I went into a dealer the other day, and parked outside were a number of trailers. So the tractors were pushed inside for the service.
Yeah.
On the way out, I stopped and I looked at these trailers. The one I wouldn't we would fail it right away.
Yeah.
It was in shocking condition.
Yes.
And so the guys aren't maintaining those trails. That I know I'm lingering on this, but it is a reality out there.
Yes.
And if you've come up with a solution to help operators manage those trailers and the maintenance of the trailers, I applaud it. 3 cheers to you.
Great.
How does it work? Your system, does it tap into the canvas of the truck tractor or the truck? How does it work to give me scheduled fleet service, preventive maintenance? How does it work?
So there's a couple of methods in which it works, right? So there are, not all trucks allow you to tap into Canvas. It is very much OEM dependent. What do they allow a tracking system to engage with? So depending on what the OEM allows, we have full capability to tap into the Canvas. And that then provides a set of data that OEMs allow you to receive. Your fuel usage, your odometer reading. There's certain type of maintenance warnings and things that come through that. It's very rich data, and we can then present that to you in whatever report format, in BI type reporting. We can make dashboards kind of available to you to just make the data more readable and more easily understandable. So you can then take the right decisions on it. And then we have vehicles that don't have Canvas capability, in which case you rely on the tracking system itself, the GPS data that it provides, and the data that it collects along the way, things like your harsh braking, acceleration. These devices are very advanced. They've got accelerometers built in. They can pick up all sorts of telemetry data. And then you would use that to then determine the usage of your asset, where you need to then apply training, etc., to pick up sort of bad habits in advance, to pick up how drivers are using your vehicle. And then you can schedule things based on the telemetry data from the tracking system itself. So both options exist. If you have the connectivity for it, we'll do it. If you don't, we'll still give you data via the telemetry devices,
Ralph, I've seen because of the pressures of transport, and we undergoing a commodities boom in the country due to global demand, and due to the absence of rail, I'll say absence of rail, the trucking industry is under huge pressure to deliver. We have a lot of side tippers outside there going mad, but unfortunately a lot of SMMEs are getting into this with no knowledge of transport, none at all. They buy and use trailers and trucks that are absolute rubbish to start with. How do we get around that? You're talking about preventative maintenance, scheduled fleet service. Are you looking at that sector at all? How do we get around that? It's a big problem.
No, it is. It is. And look, I would advise any operator that's buying an asset to really ensure that they're getting the proper certification of these assets. There are many companies out there that offer pre-checks that can do 120-point check, etc., on assets that you buy, and to get it from a certified organization, not some mechanic on the side of the road that says, well, this asset will work. So if you get the proper certification when you're buying the asset, at least up front that the asset is usable, that it's not going to fall down in 2 days or a week, and that you're not at major risk of having to then replace parts and things like that. Telemetry data will then start collecting from the point of you purchasing the asset. We can then tell you how the asset's working after that point. But prior to that, there needs to be a different set of checks and balances that are done within the system. And legally, the law allows for companies that do pre-checks. Even when you're doing financing, there's certain requirements to make sure vehicles are roadworthy and they're in a condition that can be used safely in your fleet. And I would say not to bypass or surpass any of these measures. Make sure you don't take shortcuts around that, because you end up paying for that down the line. You really do.
100%. I'm going to end on we are all, not only transport operators, but everybody, has seen the folly of not doing preventative maintenance. And I refer to Eskom. Eskom is in dire straits at the moment, and we all know it. We live with it daily with load shedding. They did not do maintenance on the plants. And look at what's happened now. Look at the results. We've inherited that, and it's going to take years to fix. If you don't maintain the fleet, the same thing. It's going to break down. It's not going to perform. And we've got exactly the same thing happening with many fleets in South Africa. And you've got the tools to help them avoid this, to get it back on track. And it's really needed, because I think preventative maintenance is a key to profitable operations and also to road safety, of which South Africa has a dismal record. Let's get it right, and the tools are here. as you've outlined there, Ralph.
Yes.
Ralph, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.